Hello, people online that I cannot see, but hopefully you can see me and you can hear me pretty well. My name is Mo. I'm a learning architect and the owner and the founder of instructional design consultancy called The Catalyst. We design learning games, board games, card games, escape games, and obviously the usual learning design products that everyone is familiar with. So this presentation is usually done in like an hour, or sometimes it can last for like 90 minutes. So please, if you have any questions, do put it up in the chat and I'll do my best to answer them pretty promptly. And in order for you to get everything in what I'm going to be talking about, I have left you resources on in the resources section for you to go back to, because what I'm going to be talking about is something that is a little bit of a helper, a guidance, a framework, if you may, that can take you into a step-by-step procedure to how to possibly build and ideate a learning board game. And I've put up the analogy of the Fibonacci sequence. So the Fibonacci simply is that the sum of the two previous numbers is equal to the number afterwards. So it's built on accumulation, a snowball effect. Every time you add it up, it gets higher in value and it gets higher in benefit. So let me take you from the start. What is games and gamification? Games is basically an artificial conflict where you get an input and you have an output. The input is the player or the players, the learning content, and the output are achieving the learning objectives and being able to get to that outcome. That outcome can be something that the learners can do, an action that they can carry out and undergo. And within that, you have the artificial conflict, that thing that they're trying to overcome or collaborate on or work with in order for them to get to that learning objective. So when we're talking about board games, which is one of the best formats that you can use to have a game. Why? Well, video games can be done in an open world. It can be done asynchronously. It can be done in a co-op format. But when you're doing a board game, you can feel it, you can touch it, you can talk to people, you can have altercations, and you can have ongoing negotiations. It's amazing. It's a good vibe. You gotta love having a board game. And I love having board games my way when we're doing it in classrooms and we're doing it in events and when we're doing it for clients, because our board games are pretty huge. You can entertain an audience of 20 or 25 all working together. And I'm going to show you pictures on how to do that. But that doesn't mean that board games have to be done this way. It can be done in the same format where 5 or 6 people are playing together, or even 2 people are doing it together. But if we're going to be building games for learning, well, we need to go into a series of steps. This is when the Fibonacci sequence or the Fibonacci steps will come to play. And this is how we're going to be dismantling board games. So let me take you into this step by step. The first step here is that we need to understand the reality of the situation, the learning. And I'm going to be piggybacking here on action mapping. In the world of learning and development, specifically in instructional design, where the kitchen of learning and development is all about, you need to do a map to what actions we want the learners to carry out and do. And obviously, many of us in instructional design, we do depend on the work of Kathy Moore and her book, Map It. So imagine that we're going to be going through a sequence here of different questions. The more you answer that question and you offer data, lucrative data, beneficial data, lump sum of data, it can help you out in creating a game. It can help you in putting that input and reaching that output and creating a true conflict that people can have friction with. So in action mapping, first, what really is the exact performance gap? When we're doing learning, we're building up a learning for a function. So we need to understand we're not here doing a game just for the sake of entertainment. This is not a commercial game. We're not playing Catan or Monopoly. We're trying to let people here go through an artificial conflict based on a performance issue or a gap that they're going through. And once we understand what is the performance gap, we will get to understand that in order for that gap to be filled, to be bridged, we need people to carry out specific actions, to do specific activities. And this is when we start to understand, okay, there are actionable objectives. The good old Bloom's taxonomy and Robert Mager and all the good people that tell us about actionable verbs where people will be doing certain things within the learning experience or within the learning environment to bridge that gap. And afterwards, which desired actions or behaviors learners need to exhibit to bridge the gap? So what do you want people to do specifically? What do you want people to carry out? How do you want people to behave? What do you want them to do? Is it to communicate? Is it to collaborate? Is it to build up a plan? Is it to lead something? Is it to transcend a chain of command? What do you want them to do? You're not trying to build a game where people are just going to be having aimless engagement, but you want them to carry out specific behaviors within a border that you can create. And accordingly, we need to think, how can we break down those actions into smaller, achievable tasks? So do you want them to go through everything in project management, or you want them to do a WBS, which is a work breakdown structure, for example? Do you want them to do everything in leadership, or maybe carry out specific activities in situational leadership or leading teams through a crisis or a change? So we need to face reality here, reality of what's happening now and where you want people to go. And after which, we get to talk about logos. So according to Plato, in his book, The Republic, there are three main aspects of appeal that can persuade people. You either have the ethos, which is purpose and credibility, and this is done by Plato, and this is done by Aristotle. And you have your pathos, which is the emotions and the narrative, then the aesthetics and the overall appeal, the zhuzh that you put into it. But then you have the logos, and the logos is pretty important, because logos is the step-by-step application, is templates, processes, how can I put it? Sequences that people need to follow. Logos is everything in learning, because we're not going to take people out of this by just a narrative or by giving them lump sum of knowledge, because according to Kathy Moore's book, Map It, learning doesn't really equal an information dump or a knowledge dump. And quizzes do not equal application, and learners do not need to know everything. Those are like the main mistakes when you're trying to map the actions. You're trying as much as possible to put step-by-step application and try to let people come out of a game or even a simple learning experience with tools, with things that they can depend on that can help them be offboarded from the game to the job, to what they're doing, to their day-to-day application. And that's why Carl Kapp from the University of Pennsylvania says that gamification and learning games are not a panacea. You cannot just apply a simple game that can be utilized to everything. You need to know what you want people to do specifically. And when we're going to be talking about what to do, then we need to talk about the logos. So which reference and updated techniques or frameworks to follow for application? And which activities are innate to the objectives to come to life? And accordingly, which real world scenarios to build on? Because good that you have the applications and good that you have the techniques, but is it possible to happen in that industry for those students, for those people in that culture with that level of inclusivity or that level of accessibility, or even for specific genders, and the list just goes on. So I need to cater the right logos that would fit with real world scenarios. That's why one of the main aspects is that you need to build a learner persona, and you need to understand more about whom are you talking to, and from which do we need to make that learning game abstract or narrative based? Now, let's close the thought bubble here and tell you about something. Games in general, and if you can go back to like Board Game Geek or Noble Knights or any platform that has like a database of games, and I would always recommend Board Game Geek, you will find that there are many different types of games and different genres. Mainly those games are dissected into two, either abstract games like chess or checkers, games that do not have high dependency on narrative or a scenario or a simulation. Sometimes they're too mathematical in nature. As a matter of fact, I always tell my students something, that games at the very bottom of it, the gist of it, it's basically an Excel sheet. And abstract games are truly an Excel sheet that comes into life as a game. And also on the flip side of it, what sometimes people can call serious games are games that are highly dependent on narrative, on a story, on real world scenarios. So when we look at this, we will find an axis. You have your absolute abstraction in games and pure simulation. So absolute abstraction is basically a game that is dependent on mathematics. And on the other side, you have pure simulation, which is what we call a serious game. And what I'm calling a serious game here can be not specifically for entertainment. It's actually a game that can be carried out by NASA or the military, or that game that they did at the WHO to simulate if a pandemic happened, what will we do and how will we be able to contain it and deal with it. Those are all considered serious games. There's even a conference called the Serious Game Conference, and that happens in Sweden and happens in Italy every year. So between both, between the absolute simulation and the absolute abstraction, comes the balance. That is a board game. A little bit of abstraction and a little bit of a simulation. And I do love that you can do an abstract game, but just a little bit of pathos, a little bit of a narrative that can let people have that look and feel, that form of engagement that can bridge an understanding to them and help them have that relevance, that this game is made for us. This game is helping us do something. And let me give you an example here. When we're creating a game, we need to first understand the application, first understand what is happening, get to know the framework, get to know the real world application, in order for us to create something that is called a mechanic. So mechanics are the way I like to call them, the steam engines of learning games, or games in general. Mechanics are the mechanisms, the gears, the cogs that we put that would provoke the learners, that would provoke the players to act in a certain way. If you want to learn more about this, there's actually a complete body of research called the MDA. The MDA by Robert Zubik and Marc LeBlanc is a research paper into what is mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics. Mechanics is what a designer will put, the cogs, the gears that will push people to do certain things in a game, and we put them meticulously so it can show in the form of dynamics that the learners or the players will be carrying out. And it's all enveloped by aesthetics, by the appeal, by the engagement, by the overall experience that people will be enjoying. It can be very highly dependent on the aesthetics. You get yourself a serious game. Or something that just have a little bit of aesthetic and narrative. You get yourself something that is borderline abstraction. And I told you I'm going to tell you about an example. So here's one time where we had a cybersecurity company that wanted us to simulate the work of business developers that go and deal with a lot of changes and a lot of hard negotiations in different countries. So we've done our well-thought analysis, we understood the case, and we created something that can truly simulate, number one, VUCA, which is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, which is something that I want them to experience and simulate to see how can they deal with it. We put also negotiation management, and we put aspects like the BATNA or the ZOPA and the WATNA. The BATNA is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. And I wanted people to go through this. I want them to simulate that feeling, that narrative, that thing, because I need to put a lot of narrative into this. This is not going to be just abstraction. I need to put the balance. So this is when we created something that looks like this. we've created a game called Conquest. And we've represented it into a board game where people will be huddling around a situation where they need to conquer different areas and lands in a hypothetical situation of conquering the world or the old world, where we have the Byzantine Empire and Andalusia and the Aztec and the Arabian Peninsula and all Persia, and they're trying to conquest and conquer as much land as possible. And this is how it looked like. We had people huddle around the big board, try as much as possible to conquer the lands. This is the CEO, by the way. He's extremely competitive. And they were dealing with a lot of negotiations, and they were trying to conquer, and they were trying to apply the bakna and apply dealing with change. And this is one of our game masters that was handling the game. And in order for us to let them focus on the game rather than focus on what should I do step by step, we've added a player's aid where we will put different rounds that would represent what they do on the job, the plots on the conquest distribution, how can they get revenue and income, so we can, as much as possible, simulate what is happening on the job to them, what is happening in real life. We took literally everything that we got from their reality and we've put it in a game. We even offered them KPIs to achieve. Each and every team had a secret mission of maybe trying to achieve 3 wells and 4 houses and 6 forts, and they will be collecting 2,000 drachmas to get to effectiveness. So what did we do away from the ego stroking that I was just doing right now? Number one, we understood the logos. And by understanding the logos, we started to look at what are the core mechanics that we want people to go through. Core mechanics here, we are represented by specific cards. Like, for example, number one, people here need to have a victory condition. That victory condition can be achieving the highest form of points and trying to get the best score out of the game. So victory condition has to be tied with how people will be learning about the game, which is dealing with change and getting the best form of negotiation. So we need to include the mechanic of a victory condition. Here we're represented it by the god Ra from Egyptian mythology, because every game design must have a conclusive, distinctive mechanic to show how winning occurs and how champions are requested. Each and every game also must have strategy. And that strategy was stemmed out the logos, the templates, the sequence that we got from them in action mapping. And since it's a learning game, there has to be a representation of progression, a progression system where at each and every step, at each and every round, they're leveling up in their understanding of what's happening. Imagine yourself playing Mario, Super Mario. And when you're playing Mario, at first you're just exploring things around. You're like clicking and seeing if Mario can jump and how Mario can move. And as you go forward, your level of intricacy increases and the severity of the game increases. And every time they're trying to push you into higher challenges. This is a progression system, and we represent this by each and every round. Things will get higher and more severe, so we can cater the form of dynamics that will be helping them get to that victory condition and would help them simulate a learning game, simulate the real world scenarios. So in order for us to get a proper progression system, we need to offer embedded assessments where each and every action that they would do would give them, well, obviously, an embedded assessment to tell them whether they're doing this right or wrong, because learning can only happen when people fail. And whether they fail or whether they win, they would get an indication that would tell them to either move forward or to pivot and change what they're doing. This helps them progress even better. This is considered a core mechanic. And no single game can be a game without a little bit of loss of virtue. So here, we need to include the god Fusion from Japanese mythology. And it represents our bias towards loss. We either try to run away from loss or as much as possible, get loss out of the way to win the game. Loss and defeat as failure is important in a well-designed game, allowing learners to change their mindset about how to progress in a game. We are either motivated by a desire to gain or a fear of loss. So you need to let people have that fear, but not to the extent of humiliating them or intimidating them, but just to nudge them enough to move and get better at each and every step. And in any learning game, not everything has to be completely understood right from the get-go. That's why we provided them with learning aids. This is when we consider the card curiosity, the mechanic of curiosity. More often in game design, not everything has to be fully explained to the learners. A little bit of mystery can encourage them to go into various diverse ways. Shout out to all gamers who go into big dungeons and open worlds where they explore around. And it's one of the things that push us to continue on. Imagine if this is going to be in a board game, then I don't have to explain everything. You have to explore it as you go, or at least have an aid that can help you on the way. And then, if all of this is happening, we need to include an investment mechanic, something that can let the learner, let the player continue on in the game, where we're represented it by a woodpecker. A woodpecker is a very lovely creature. It's an animal that has never dying persistence, as long as there's a benefit out of it. So if they're getting a winning, they feel that their work, their effort, what they're doing, their thoughts, their strategy has a return, they're gaining something out of it, they will continue on. But if the game is easy and there's no loss and there's nothing I'm going to be curious about, why on earth will I be invested in it? So we need to include that. That's a core mechanic in any learning game. This mechanic is utilized to let learners appreciate and cultivate this behavior in a certain game design towards reaching the learning goals. And no game on earth can ever be done without a little bit of ego stroking, a little bit of social status, just a little bit of feeling that I am doing good and I am better than everyone else. And that's why we have to include the mechanic of social status. Social status, we're putting the analogy of Poseidon, who was known, and his name was translated by Plato as the knower of many things. Poseidon's our mechanic of social status. As status fuels greater visibility for people, creating opportunities to create new relationships, or feeling jelly that why they are winning and we are not. It produces high sense of achievement, and this mechanic is also used in coordinates with putting points and having victory condition. Those are the core mechanics that I would consider that no single game, whether a board game, escape game, for learning can ever happen or can ever work without having them. Otherwise, you're just playing a game for pure entertainment, not a game that can really take me from one step to the other so I can get to a victory condition that I can utilize and build upon and be off-boarded by to do what I want to do. Last but not least, we have supporting mechanics that might happen and might not. For example, certain games, as I said, might have a theme and a narrative or not, might have teams and guilds or not, might have competition or not, might have cooperation or collaboration or not, might have a use of technology or not. Those are supporting mechanics. In some situation, you might be able to use it. In other situations, you might not. The point of the matter is, when you're trying to build a game, you need to start in a backward design or a reverse engineering type of thinking. You start first from the victory condition and how we want to achieve it. And then you put up a strategy. And from that strategy, you're putting, okay, I'm going to be putting this experience element, this mechanic, to take you forward to the next one, which is where I'm creating a progression system, creating embedded assessments that can make me rethink my ways, and then creating a loss aversion that can make me pivot and can take me forward because I'm curious and I'm invested, and can make me go back and think about what I've done so I can make it even better, and just goes on and on and on till you make up a basic board game system. Obviously, I have a lot more to mention here and a lot more to the Fibonacci sequence, but haven't left you stranded in the desert. I've left you a PDF, an interactive PDF with the sequence of questions that you should follow through step by step in an interactive PDF that you can click through, get links, go through an infographic that can tell you more about it, and also references that can help you build your next learning board game. It's a work in progress. It's a trial and error. You're not going to be able to make it from like the get-go, but at least it's going to give you a good solid base to build upon it your next board game for learning. Hope this is beneficial to you all. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, please do scan this QR code to reach me out on LinkedIn, and I'm willing to answer any questions and help you out along the way.